So tonight we'll be delving into defense, what we'll be looking at today. So we're going to pick apart sort of one drill and then talk a little bit about the terminology and the words that we use to sort of when we explain these sort of drills. So that way there's a bit of a consistent run from what we teach, from what you teach as well. So you can see the consistency through both ends. I'll just cast my screen. Get rid of that one. And I'll just cast my whole screen, that'll be easiest. All right, perfect.
There we go. Good.
All right, cool. So hope you can see that nice and big on my screen there. So we've got all about sort of teaching defense. So first thing I thought I'd start with, and I know I've covered something previously about defense, but I thought I'll just go over sort of thing, my values and what I believe in on my defensive end. First thing I always emphasize is ball pressure. And that's something, no matter what team I coach, I always talk about making sure the ball carrier is under pressure. And I always deem that by saying touch distance. So long as you're touch distance from the player, you're showing ball pressure. That means you're in their head, they're not thinking about how they can create, set up and run their offense or get a shot away. They're more worried about protecting the ball and what you're doing. So always say, be nice and close. And that's same as sort of Ben mentioned that last week, if you remember back. He spoke about that excellent tall girl who never shoots in one of the games he was playing. You know, that they relaxed that ball pressure off her and she was able to create and do a lot of awesome things. But when they got that ball pressure onto her, she wasn't able to do those things. So that's sort of the same sort of philosophy that we both have on that one. Next one is make them uncomfortable. So it's similar to the ball pressure, but it applies to everyone. I always say we don't want other teams who we play against feeling any comfort throughout the game. So that's simple as not getting the catch where they want. If they want to catch at a certain spot, we try and make them catch it a meter away. You know, if they want to catch and face the ring, we want to make sure that they have their back to us or back to the ring. Just trying to make them out of their comfort zone as much as possible. And with sort of the youth league guys I coach, we speak about that we don't want players to be able to sort of catch the ball and shoot straight away. So we try and eliminate a catch and shoot situation. Influence the shot. So we want to challenge the shot without fouling. And I avoid ever saying block the shot, and I always go with influence the shot. Blocking the shot, people are going to overcommit to try and swat the ball away, and they always focus on the ball. When you do that, you don't take into consideration where the player is, and they'll end up barreling the player over, and there'll be a foul. And I watch a fair bit of NBA. If anyone else does watch a fair bit of NBA, I was watching some games today, and someone who's really good at that is someone like a James Harden. He'll get the person up in the air and draw that contact. And one of the commentators said it perfectly today. They said that's the silliest thing to do is to foul a jump shooter, because you're taking someone who shoots it at say 40% from outside three, and then when he goes to the foul line, he's shooting at 90%. So in the numbers there, you'd rather him shoot a shot at 40% rather than go to the line and where they're 90%, where they're pretty much going to hit it. So we always say influence the shot. And in the simple terms, it's just changing whatever their pure shooting form is, trying to make them tweak it slightly. If they have to fade away or off balance or something, or they have to hold a second longer before they shoot it, we want to try and do that. So it's just not fluid for them. It's sort of jolted. And the last thing is finish the possession. So don't give the opposition another chance to score. Reward our hard work by coming up with the rebound. And these are four things that I have in place with my youth league team. But then we also have the other ones that we add in. But these are the first four we started with. So 12 months ago when we first started training, these are the first 4 things that we came up with and said, these are the 4 things we want to do. And then from that, we branched off and we added to it. So we continually add more layers to our values on defense. And I like that because, they have a bit of input on that. And, the better we get, the more layers we add to it and the better we become. Next, I want to talk about just points of reference. Something we haven't really covered at all yet is points of reference on the court. So sometimes I know Drew and I, when we're presenting, we'll always talk about maybe specific spots on the court. We might talk about, out in the 45 or a short corner or an elbow. So I thought this one offense on the left-hand side is a good terminology thing of just the words we may use. So if we speak about the 45 is just pretty much on the 3-point line here on the 45-degree angle. And then that goes for both sides. Short corner is just this spot here. It's closer to the ring that's in the corner. So it's not the dead corner, it's a short corner. Low post, just down here on, might have called the block before. I always teach the kids what the block is because it's always that big fat block of color on the side of the key. And then elbow. So a lot of the kids I teach, I make sure I go through this terminology with them so they know all this, because I do ramble it off just as I go now. I don't think about it. It's just a part of my terminology that I use. So I make sure I try and teach the kids the terminology to use. So I thought it'd be a good one for you guys to have. And on the other side here is our defensive one. So we talk about our low split, our high split, and then we talk about the nail head. The nail head's the very top. All right. And I'll get into what split line is in a second on the next slide. I've got a bit of graphic to show that. So here's a bit of a demo on the court, what it looks like with players on the court. So this dotted red line here is the split line that we refer to. So what that pretty much is, it's pretty much a line to the dead center of the court that splits the court into 2. And then on that, you have, if I just go back, you have the different types. So you can a low split, high split, or you can be at the very top of it on the nail head. So down here, play number 1 over here, they're guarding play number 1, who's over here, and number 4 over here has the ball. All right. So the way I explain this for defense, this person probably doesn't need to be by their side, because the chances of player 4 making that pass all the way across here is very highly unlikely. If they make that pass, it'll be a big lob loopy pass. I'm sure number 1 can get out there and guard his player. So when the ball's over this all the way over here, he can come into what's called the low split, or I've referred to it in the past with kids as basket, because purely you're pretty much going to be under the basket. And play number 2 here, they're in high split. So their player is a bit closer to the ball, so they're going to be a bit closer to their player. And I sometimes call this one pistols. And the good one for kids, this one is, they ask, oh, why is it called pistols? Well, it's because you like, in the old West, you get your pistols out and you're pointing your pistols at ball and player. So that's something that's always helped kids remember what they're going to do there. As we work around to play number 3 here, they'll be in what's called denial. So their play is just here, and they're just making sure that pass doesn't come in here. And that fits in really well with me saying, making them uncomfortable. Because it'd be really easy and comfortable for them to want to get the catch, just stand there and get it. Whereas now he goes, if he wants to catch, he has to come further out here. So once again, pushing them back further, away from the basket, not what they want to do. This player has the ball, and this defender guarding them is touch distance, and that's referred to as, on ball, or sometimes we call it stick. I think I've used stick before because you just stick to them like glue. You just stick onto that ball. So that's sort of with a graphic of seeing with players of all the different positions with their names attached to it. Any questions on that? No? Next thing is I'll talk about is making sure the defense can see both the player and the ball. So the yellow highlight here is what would be their vision, their eyesight of what they can see. So you're always going to make sure that the player can see their player and the ball. So same as player number 2 here, they have to twist their body so they can, in the corner of their eye, they can see their player and they can see the ball as well. So make sure you can see both those things. Player number 2, if they come up towards the nail head up here, that would be bad positioning because they can't see both the player and the ball. So when you come to these split line positions where it's a low split down here under the basket or the high split with your pistols out, you've got to be able to see your player and the ball, seeing both. All right, and the same goes for player 3, and of course player 4. Their player has the ball, so their eyesight's going to be straight on them. So you're always going to be able to see both, and that's something that you know, as you get into general play, people forget about, and they'll ball watch, and that's when they can get torn apart with people like, you know, cutting behind them and getting those easy catches. So making sure they can always see both.
But just if you go back,
yep,
a quick one through from Britt Wilson. She's asking about where would the 5th player be?
Yeah,
So,
the 5th player could be in a multitude of spots. So if it was a 5th player in, they could be out on the outside of the 3-point line, or they could come inside the key. I always stick with the 4 main ones because it fits well with the Sheldru, which is what I'm going to go through in a second. And you're primarily always going to have, say, 3 to 4 people out. And it becomes a lot trickier to teach where to position people when they fill these posts around the key. Then there's a lot of different ways you approach it, which we're not going to cover just yet.
Yeah. So I know that we don't want to cover it from a Sheldru perspective, but I think as easy as to looking at it in 2 ways. If the 5th person is out, then we follow the same help principles.
Yep.
If the 5th person is in, I would be saying maybe something like we want to deny all the posts. So basically we're playing the same as what the 3 person would be from a post up perspective. That's me. You might say something different. And also,
I always depend on where the ball is with them.
Correct.
So if we had a post person in, if I can I'll just insert some sort of shape. So that's your 5 person there. If they were sort of here and the ball was there, I would say the defense should stand in front, and we call that fronting. We don't let them catch the ball, you know, in a straight line like that. So if the ball is usually below that foul line, if the ball's below the foul line and they're on that same side, I always say front them and don't let them catch. If the ball was higher, so the 4 player was up here somewhere, I would say below that number, put that 3 player and deny. So front and deny.
Awesome. And great question.
Love the good questions. And so we're going into the shell drill, which is pretty much the foundation of how you teach sort of team defense. We've covered it briefly previously, but we're going to go into a bit more detail tonight with it. Now, this is probably the best drill to teach team defense. I've used it from even some under 8s all the way through to weekly. When we're doing our youth league men, we always run shell drill. We always run a variation of it. And what we're going to go through today is we're going to go through how to build up to it. And this is teaching the positioning of where you're going to be. So I always try and start with, I can just try and get my zoom correct. Cool. So we're starting this screen just here. So numbers are going to be matched up on each other. So player 4 here in the black circle is on defense, and they're playing against the number 4 on the offense over here. And there's 4 offense spread out around the 3-point line. Player 1 starts with it. All right, and because player 4 is guarding 4, then they need to adjust their position to where they would be on the court. So if the ball was here in a game and there was all the players in the court, then player 4 would be in that low split or under the basket position. All right, and then player 1 will pass to player 2. And as they pass to player 2, they know, well, I know that. I'm going to move a bit closer. I'm going to move up the line. So I move up to a high split now, or I'll get my pistols out. And then as the ball adjusts across again, they know, okay, from here, from my high split, I know I'm going to be 1 pass away. I'm going to get to my denial spot. And they get to their denial spot. And eventually that next pass comes along, and then they're in that stick position or they're on the ball. And then from there, when they're on the ball, from here, then you play it 1-on-1. So 4 goes against 4, trying to score. So from there, what I'll do is then I'll always say follow your pass. So then player 1 would go to player 2 spot, player 2 would go to player 3 spot, 3 will go to 4, and the guy who just played offense will play defense on here, and this player's playing defense would come out to player 1 spot. If I got more than, say, 5 people, I'll just have a bit of a line happening on the side here and bring them in slowly that way. Eventually, from here, you build this up to 4-on-4, but you start with 1-on-1. An important thing to remember is from when the player 4 starts in here up until they go 1-on-1, they can't steal or intercept the ball until their corresponding offensive player or player 4 here has caught it. So once they catch the ball, I use a term called live. Once they catch the ball, you go live. Otherwise, you're just playing passive defense where you're not stealing. All right, you're still going through at pace in your right positions, but you're not stealing the ball. And next way I would progress that is I'll bring in a second player. So this is Sheldru drill with 2-on-2. So same premise as before, whereas you have those 4 players on the outside of the 3-point line, and this time you have 2 defenders. So 4 is playing on 4 again, 3 is playing on 3, and they mixing the balls here with 1. So if this isn't a game, where would they be position-wise? Well, player 4 would be once again under the basket on low split. Player 3 would have their pistols out on that high split. And then as that ball gets passed around, they adjust their positioning. All right, and when you do, if you are to do this drill, it might be handy to yourself as the coach dictate the speed at which they make that pass. So you might park yourself down the bottom here, all right, and you give a directional point when you're ready for the pass and making sure the players are adjusting to their spot. So I like when you add the second player in because with player 4, you're pretty much going from the lowest point to on the ball. That's that, and then it's nothing further. So they go from the low split to high split to denial to on the ball. Whereas when you bring in a second player, like player 3, well, player 3 has to go from the high split here, then they'll come into a denial spot. And after in that denial spot there, their player is going to receive the ball. So then they will go on to the stick position. But then that player 3 is going to pass it again. So then they're going to jump with the ball and go denial on the other side. So sometimes when you do this drill, if you just do it with that player 4 all the time and just do it the one way, they're not getting used to going that extra pass of what they do after that. So I like the fact that player 3 has to go from that high split to denial to stick back into denial on the other side. So they're used to saying what happens next after we pass that ball. And then once again, once player 4 gets that ball, then you play 2-on-2, the 3s and 4s, battle in a game of 2-on-2 going to the basket. And then rotation wise, same again, you'd follow your pass. So player 1 would take player 2 spot, player 2 to player 3, 3 to 4. Then the 4 goes on the defense. If you're just playing defense on 4, You go to the defense's 3, and the 3 player steps out to the 1 spot or into the rotation positions to come in on that. Next, as you can guess, we bring in 3-on-3. All right, so it's the exact same thing, but we start this 2-player in the denial spot. So important to remember that play in that denial spot can't steal the ball, they can't tip away, they can't do anything like that. It is there being a passive defender in their position. So player 1 makes that pass off to player 2, then player 2 will adjust, 3 will adjust, 4 will adjust. This is getting, say, rather than having the focus on just 1 player now, you're watching 3 players to make sure they're all moving at the same time. All right, and this is a good point as well. Whereas you can start training this player at the back here to start talking and communicating, because there's only one person who can see everything on the floor, and that's that player 4, because they're very back of the court. Their vision, they can see everything. So they could be telling people if they're not moving to move. So if that ball's been made, if player 3 is not moving and they're moving up into their spot, they'll be telling it, if that was me at number 4 and Drew was number 3, I'll be moving and say, Drew, get on denial, get up. And then Drew would know he's going to move up and adjust his positioning. All right, and teaching your kids, another way to teach your kids to have those conversations to help each other out, because in a game, you can't always do it. You know, and that's something that I always try and do. I try and train my players to sort of help each other out in the game, because they're teammates, and we only experience success if they work together and they work it out as a team. And then next, player 2 has the ball, and we make that pass across to player 3, and then they go to adjust. So when it gets to 3-on-3, player 2 has to do that sort of denial, stick denial, and he goes and he adjusts to a high split there, and moves his position. So rather than going from, like I said before, that low split to high split to denial to stick, it's teaching like a different sort of order of what you got to follow, so you don't fall into that trap. Because a lot of the times, kids will go, okay, I go from my split, I go denial, my player passed the ball, I can switch off now, my job's done, I don't have the ball. Whereas in this drill, player 2, their player has the ball, they've passed it, and they've got to stay switched on. So it's still training them to stay switched on regardless of once your player has passed the ball. You've still got a job to do once that ball's gone. And then once again, once that ball gets worked all the way around, we keep adjusting our position. And eventually player 4 has it. And then this time we play 3-on-3. So whenever we get into the game aspect of it, then we just say whoever doesn't have a defender on them, they don't participate. So they're just going to wait for this 3-on-3 to play out. And then it's up to you how you want that to roll. You could say that you let them play it out until they score or until the defense gets it, or you might put a time limit on it. In the past, I've usually always put a time limit on it. I usually say, depending on what it is, if it's 1-on-1, I'll usually say 7 seconds. If it's 2-on-2, I'll probably still say 7 seconds. But once you get to 3-on-3, you might say, all right, you've got 15 seconds to try and get a score. And then the challenge is, it's easier when you go 1-on-1 and 2-on-2, because there's usually only 2 positions you'll be in. You'll either be denial or you'll be in stick on the ball. But once you get to 3-on-3, people have to sort of remember to get into that split line position. So that's where the tricky part comes in. Trying to get kids to remember that if they're sort of 2 passes away or their player's a bit off the ball, if player 2 runs down to this corner over here, then player 2 needs to drop down to that low split down there. And that is the most challenging thing to teach any basketballer, is to adjust their positioning like that. And that's something that senior men, youth league boys still struggle with and still don't always do, adjust their positioning. So really being, teaching that or getting them to practice that as much as possible is pretty important moving forward.
Sorry, Locke, that last one.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Yeah, go.
we do this drill and we go into 3-on-3, which I think is great, which enables us to work on our offensive rules as well as our defensive rules in the same drill.
Yep.
Hypothetically speaking, 4 beats 4 off the dribble.
4 versus 4.
So just in this, so it's 3 versus 3.
Yep.
The number 4 guy beats number 4 guy off the dribble going to the basket.
Yep.
What happens?
Well, it'll probably number two player. We're going to step off and help them in that way. That's what I would say. So if player 4, say, beats them off that dribble, say, going towards the baseline, I would expect player 2 to go across, block them. All right. Player 3 would then drop into that sort of split line spot, that low split, and once they recover, they'll fight and get back. When it gets to stuff like that, a lot of people have a lot of different beliefs on what they want and how they rotate. And I know it gets really confusing with this stuff when I coach my youth league players as well, because we have a different set of standards depending on the person. So I know when I was with Tom a couple of years ago, that we had our big centre who wasn't quick. So then would often say that in that sort of situation, like if he helped and that pass went out to player 2, then someone else would go cover his player and he wouldn't do it because he wouldn't get there in time, and would have different rules in place for different people. But in all fairness and teaching to the letter of what you would say, you should probably say that if 4 gets beaten, 2 goes to help. All right. We say like they bump them, as we say, we bump them to sort of like not actually physically push them off their line, but bump them off the line they want to go, which gives 4 a time to recover and come back. And that time, player 3 drops into that sort of high split there and sort of try to deflect a pass that goes to both, and then we recover. So we bump and recover on that. Does that answer?
Perfect. Yep.
And finally, as we build into it, you get to the last stage, which is when you go Sheldru 4-on-4. So when you bring that extra player in the one spot and say everyone's got a player now, and then once the ball gets reversed around to player 4, you're playing 4-on-4. All right. The only tricky thing about this is the way you rotate. It gets really tricky because a lot of teams probably have 8 players, and rotating through does get challenging with this. So as it goes, player 1 starts with it, makes that pass, and everyone adjusts their positioning. As the ball goes across again, adjust your positioning. So player 1's going from that stick position into a denial, into that high split, and then as it gets one last time, they go into that low split. So you can sort of see where the people go. Now, with whether you go into that high split or low split, usually the best way to describe that is by how many passes you are away. So if you look at, I think I've got one more picture down here. Yep, so it's the same picture as before. So if you look at it here, player 1 is under that basket in that low split. They are there because they are technically they're going is 3 passes away from the ball. So to get the ball to second number 1, they've got to go 1, 2, 3 passes. So if you're 3 passes away, you can safely come into a help position. Player number 2 here, they are 2 passes away. So if you're 2 passes away, you can come into a pistol's position as well. You can come into a help spot. If you are 1 pass away, then your player is very close to being able to catch the ball and shoot, or catch and create and do something. So you can't venture too far away from your player. So you need to be in a denial spot. And if your player has the ball, you need to be on them, stick like glue. So depending on where your player is with the ball, you need to adjust your position to that. So 2 or more, you can come into a help position. If your player has the ball or 1 pass away, your really close to your player. Now, another thing that sort of comes into it as well is you might say, okay, what if player 2 over here runs down to the baseline in this corner? Well, if your player moves to what would be further away, then you just adjust your positioning. Sorry, let me change it. Let me go player 3. So if player 3 ran to that corner, then the defender could go into a low split position because they would have moved to what would be 3 passes away. So it's not until they come, and then number 2 would still stay there because it's not until you come close enough to be 1 pass away. So player 4 to pass to player 2, depending on your age group, that's not really a high percentage pass that you have to make there. If player 2 moved across, then yes, but otherwise they couldn't. So it's only when with your player moves and you're going to make a decision on where you think the best position to be is. Hope I haven't confused you because it could be a bit confusing with that. So the best way to try and remember it as is if you're 1 pass away, if you think your player is 1 pass away from the ball, then you should be in the denial spot. If they're 2 or more passes away, you can come onto a help spot on that one. Any questions on that? No? Oh, perfect. So that's the Sheldru. I want to get out of this one. So that's pretty much the Sheldru, and that's sort of how you build your way up to going from 1-on-1 to 4-on-4 with that one. That's pretty much all I really wanted to cover today was the Sheldru of how you build your way up to it, and then the terminology behind it. Is there any questions or anything that you guys want to discuss before we end things up? I know it's a bit of a shorter session, but cover it through pretty quick what we wanted to get through.
There's no questions from anybody else.
No?
I do have one.
Yeah.
I just lost everybody though. There we go. I do have one. So, and it's around your philosophy. Your to deny 1 pass away.
Yep.
I'm lucky enough to be coaching juniors, so under 10s and 12s, where we're not allowed to play zone defenses. So we can't go and sag off our man and just hold up a space. But what we do see a lot is what's referred to as pack line defense. So for anyone that doesn't know pack line defense, basically, instead of denying the pass 1 pass away, you stand off and allow that pass, and you're basically helping on penetration. So why, Lachlan, do you make the choice to not play that style, but play the denial style of defense?
I'll just get something up quick, Drew.
Yeah, no problems. This is, I probably know the answer, but I'm looking for an explanation from one of our experts.
So this is a presentation we did a lot earlier on about the difference between pack line and denial, and where the 2 pictures here, and we're pretty much we're all on the side of denial is better. So pack line is pretty much this sort of yellow sort of highlight part of the area that you're going to sort of pack that spot and try and protect that and not let people get driving lanes in there. Very effective way of defending man to man, but it's not very high on pressure. And
yeah, sorry, just quickly, the reason why we see it in under 10s and 12s pack line is because outside shooting is not a factor in the game. So they allow basically passes around the outside, and they allow kids to shoot from the outside because the percentages are so poor. That's all.
Yeah, and that's true. And it's not exactly like a zone, but similar philosophy as a zone where you're sort of protecting the paint, but you're still guarding a player. Whereas we had the question a while back of saying the difference between a pack line and a zone was like in this pack line position here, if player 3 cut through to the baseline in a zone, player 3 would stay there, defender, but in a pack line man-to-man, player 3 would move positions and be near them. Pack line is also quite easy to pick up and to run. It's not very challenging because players 2 and 3 only do something when their player has the ball. Something that's harder to do is play denial. And the directive from our governing body, which is Basketball Victoria, is they say they prefer teams to practice and to teach the denial way because it is a more challenging way to play basketball. They want their athletes to learn that way, and then later on they can come back and still learn pack line. So if you teach denial and your kids can do denial, it's pretty much a given that if you can do denial, you can do pack line. But it doesn't go the other way around. If you can do pack line, doesn't mean you can do denial because it's a harder way to play basketball. And as a coach, I like denial. I like full court pressure because mainly it tires your players out. The one thing that kids hate doing is coming off the court. They hate when they get that sub called, but if you are playing up-tempo defense and they're getting tired and they get to run up and down and they've always got this sort of pressure way of playing, they're gonna fatigue and they're gonna want to come off, which means rotating players becomes a lot easier. And you won't have parents come up to you and saying, why isn't my son or daughter getting much of a run? Because you'll be saying, well, they run their minutes and they get really tired, so we bring them off for a rest. And I doubt that if you're playing an up-tempo way, I doubt kids would be complaining about having to come off for a rest. They'll be like, thank God I get to come off for a rest. They'll actually enjoy that part of it. So yeah, the denial way is it's probably a better way to play, a more exciting way to play, and it tires your players out. And longevity-wise, it's probably setting up the players and the athletes to play at a high level for longer.
I think, thanks, mate. That's a really good answer. And I think if we couple that with what Ben was talking about last week, about building the pressure, and he had that really good chat about creating turnovers, especially in junior basketball. So the more we can put pressure on and the more turnovers we can create, the more opportunities we get to score versus the opposition scoring. So for me, that's what that's.
Yeah. And personally, if I come up against someone playing pack line, all I'm going to do offensively is just hold onto the ball, pass that ball around until we get a shot that we're completely happy with. So it's just slowing the game. I'll slow the game down, which is probably against what you want to be doing.
Like, would it depend on what level of skill your players have, whether you play pack line or denial? You mean if under 10s and 12s you're talking about, obviously the level of 12s are going to be better than 10s. You mean, would you introduce the pack line to start and then the denial as they got to 12s?
No, I'll start with denial.
Yeah.
Because it's harder to teach, and they'll get stuck in habits. If they're learning the pack line straight away, they'll grasp the pack line way. But then if the next coach teaches them denial, they'll be like, oh, I already feel comfortable being back here. Whereas if you throw in the defense straight away and they're up in that denial spot, putting that pressure on, and it's better to do it earlier, because if you do it under 10s or even under 8s, and you learn to be that close, the skill level of an offensive player at the lower age group isn't as good either. So it's easier to teach that denial because you're not going to get back cut. No one's going to go behind you, or if you're playing, real intense on-ball defense, you can get really close because the skill set isn't there. They don't have the face-up moves to get past you and create a score. Whereas if you sort of taught pack line and then come that denial pressure style defense, 12s, 14s, the skill set and offensive player is a lot better, and so they can pick you apart and rip you through.
All right, thanks, mate. Good answer.
I reckon too, Pete.
Yeah.
You, like Lockie said, start off teaching denial. The other, as you're teaching denial, one pass away, the other defenders that are helping behind are learning pack line defense. So you're almost teaching them both at the same time.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The help principles. Do you know what I mean? So the guys that are at the back that are guarding in Locke's pitch of the 4 and the 5, they're playing basically pack line help defense, but because they're 2 passes away, so you can sort of teach. You're sort of learning both at the same time.
Yeah, it probably encourages the ones at the back to talk more too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, Drew. Good answer.
And also, if you do that as well, with those 2 players who play that high and low eye, the more people you have crammed into that space, the more confusion you have on defense as well. So if there is a drive, who goes to it? If there's 3 people around the key and there's a drive that happens, there's probably going to be 3 that go to it. Whereas if there's only 2 in that area, well, there's a lot more space to know that which person's going to go cover that drive.
Yep. Okay, mate. Thank you.
Well, we'll leave it there, guys. Thank you so much for logging on and participating tonight. We're going to try and look at this sort of stuff for the next couple of weeks, doing some defensive things. Drew's going to jump on next week, and he's going to do something similar, where he's going to take a drill and show us the ins and outs of it. And we're going to try and have
some full court transition D.
Yeah. So looking at he's going to look at full court, and then we'll see if we can get some other set of presenters that come in and give us their philosophy and their ideas on defense as well. So I think we can all agree that having sort of been on last week was a breath of fresh air, and it was really good to hear someone else's views. So we'll look to try and do something similar over the next fortnight and month or so. Thanks again, guys. Have a great night, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.